So, and then we,
Right. You know, how they grow up, they got big and stuff, and that was.
but then, again, cola.
Oh, right.
So we were super cheap. When we first got kids, I first. But, still is, I mean, it's not, in my eyes, they. But, whatever. I wouldn't try that. Big brother. Check out the. Food safety division. We did all of those. Wow. And they had two of us, one in the office. But, it's just kind of. Not only that. But so, what the- ceremony. Then I did. Stay with our people. This is you again. Can. Can't know. You know, matter of fact, Rambo, Rambo's, big man. Guess you.
Well, I see it every step I had, I gotta get over there and see.
Tall Dominican dude. Yeah.
Yeah. I met him the last time.
Something that's closer to you, that's all. I don't know about.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, yeah, you know, not only that, but you know, so time. Good afternoon. Yes. If you can please put your phones on vibrate or turn them off, that would be very helpful. And we have a quorum of members present this afternoon, and the New York City Board of Correction, March 12th, 2024 meeting is now in session. Our first order of business is to vote on the agenda for today's board meeting, which board members have received. Will a board member move for a vote to approve the March 12th, 2024 meeting agenda? Is there a second? There is a move and a second. Okay, 1 second. Does any member have edits or comments on the agenda? Yes, Dr. Cohen.
Thank you. The agenda as available to all of us right now does not say who will be the members of the rule-making committee to instantiate the city council's rule on unrestricted housing, solitary confinement. That's not appropriate. We should be having a vote on the resolution, and
Could you
we should be-
address the agenda? Do you have amendments or edits to the agenda that you like to?
I'm going to suggest people voting. Yeah, I would suggest that if you put back the names that you were given and that you took out, that would be fine with me. But if absent that, I'm going to encourage people to vote against the resolution,
Okay, that is your right.
against the agenda as scheduled.
Good, that is your right.
Yeah, I think
as-
that's my right. I'm not
as-
sure about your right.
As that is your right and probably your privilege.
Sorry,
okay.
you've been talking
And,
about privilege. Could you
and-
please explain what you mean by privilege to me?
And first of all, as I indicated to you prior to the meeting, I was reaching out to board members to discuss all committees. By the end of the week, I will have my recommendations for all committees,
Oh,
all committees.
in response, if I may, the last time we had a discussion of committees, Jackie Sherman and I were removed without any foreknowledge from the Death Review Committee. But we were told at the meeting, and I think it was helpful to at least find out in a public setting. It would have been preferable for us to be told what you were going to do before, so we could perhaps develop a response. But similarly, I think the committee should be named today, and the board should have the opportunity to support that resolution
Yeah,
with names.
the names will not be made today, but all names will be taken into consideration, appropriate consideration for the Rules Committee and all committees so that
Well, appropriate
there's
is for
balance.
the board to decide, because
Okay.
we select the members.
Okay, so we'll move on if you have no other comments or.
No other
edit-
comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. All in favor of approving the March 12, 24 agenda? All opposed?
Opposed?
Okay, only one objection. The agenda is approved. Our second order of business is a vote on the draft minutes for the February 28, 2024 board meeting, which board members have received. Will a board member move to a vote to approve the February 28, 2024 board meeting minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Does any member have edits or comments on the minutes? There being none, all in favor of approving the February 28th, 24 board meeting minutes? Any opposed? I just need by raise of hand or voice.
I'm in favor. No.
Okay.
Or
Okay, any opposed? Okay. Minutes for February 28th are approved. Next is a vote on a resolution to establish a rulemaking committee. The proposed resolution reads as follows. Whereas New York City Charter 626E authorizes the Board of Correction or Board or BOC to establish minimum standards for the care, custody, correction, treatment, supervision, and discipline of all persons held or confined under the jurisdiction of the Department of Correction, DOC, or the department. Whereas on June 8th, 2021, the board approved rules ending the use of punitive segregation and most other forms of restrictive housing and replacing the established units with the risk management accountability system. Whereas on January 30th, 2024, the New York City Council passed local law number 42 of 2024, banning the use of solitary confinement in city jails, providing individuals in custody due process protections prior to being placed in restrictive housing or continued use of restraints, limiting how DOC can use emergency lock-ins and requiring regular reporting on the department's use of de-escalation confinement, restrictive housing, and emergency lock-ins. Whereas local law number 42 directed the board to take any actions necessary for the implementation of this local law, including the promulgation of rules relating to procedures and penalties prior to its effective date. Now therefore be it resolved that the board will establish a rulemaking committee comprised of Board Chair Sampson, ex officio, board members to be determined, and to review the requirements of local law number 42 and draft amendments to the board's RMAS rules accordingly. And it is further resolved that board members be determined, shall serve as chair of the board's rulemaking committee. And it is further and finally resolved that a copy of this resolution be posted conspicuously on the board website. Will a board member move on a vote of the resolution?
Don't move.
Is there a second? Does any member have edits or comments?
I have a couple of comments.
Yeah.
I believe that this resolution is appropriately before the board today. I believe there's urgency to moving forward the rulemaking process that local law 42 requires the board to engage. And I don't believe that this board can vote on a resolution that doesn't set forth the composition of the committee. So I believe that we should have the composition of the committee in the resolution.
So noted, Ms. Sherman. Dr. Cohen?
I certainly second Chairman's comments. The board, as I understand it, the board bylaws require that the members of committees be chosen by the board. The proposal that you're suggesting to us today does not have the members chosen by the board. It has the members chosen by you, which is a violation of our bylaws. So if you want to suggest names again, as was suggested to you, the 3 people who volunteered, or you have some suggestion, some other people might be better placed on the committee who are not on 2 committees right now, that would be fine. But going ahead, we are not allowed to approve members of a committee without a vote of the board.
Yes.
It might be helpful if either Jasmine or Melissa could read the provisions of the bylaws, just so that we would all have that top of mind as we are considering this resolution.
Are you going to read? I prefer that, could,
Are you
Could I-
asking me to read
could
it?
could I have a copy of the bylaws, please?
Could I ask that it be read out to the?
Okay, having reviewed the bylaws, the section on committees, I would like to name folks for the committees to be included in this resolution. And then a reread of the resolution for a vote. So the amendments, or where it's to be determined, will read board members Jude, Sherman, and Hoskins. And Jude would be the chair.
I'll just like, for the record, I think we should read the bylaws so the public knows exactly what the bylaws say that the chair had, and then I'll just have some follow-up comment on that, no problem.
It's okay to read the section on committees for the record.
Section 1, the board shall establish such committees as it deems necessary. Section 2, the board shall appoint members of each committee, taking into account the preferences and expertise of board members, and shall designate 1 committee member as chair. Each committee shall meet at such times and places as it shall determine. Section 3, any board member may propose establishment of a committee of the board. Section 4, all board members are encouraged to participate in the work of the board's committees. No board member may simultaneously serve on more than 2 committees.
Thanks. Thank you for appointing, and I definitely accept the appointment on the chair. But I think the part we have to take into consideration when it says based on expertise, as to who should serve on committees should really be taken into consideration. The rulemaking committee, this has been a long-standing issue within New York City, and to not be taken lightly into how we implement that into minimum standards and rulemaking. So not challenging that you're the chair, but I don't think the expertise, not the expertise around being a chair of a committee, the expertise around corrections and the rules that we're talking about really have to be taken into consideration. Have no problems serving up under you, but I think when you appoint a chair, the expertise in corrections, DOC, solitary confinement, the history and legalities need to be taken into consideration.
Yes, so noted. Jude?
I think that's reasonable. So I've so noted.
Okay, thank you. Um, as stated previously, and I note the bylaws, but there are a number of committees that some members are not serving on. And as I mentioned to Dr. Sherman before the meeting, by the end of the week, I look to make the recommendation so that all members that are serving on appropriate committees, based on their expertise and based on my understanding on what can be delivered from those committees. But right now, we have this resolution in front of us. If there are no further objections, I'll reread the resolution with the names inserted. And I'll start where we get to, therefore be resolved that the board will establish a rulemaking committee comprised of board chair Dwayne Sampson, ex officio, board member Jude Tordnot, board member Deanna Hoskins, and board member Jackie Sherman. And that the board member Jude will serve as chair of the board's rulemaking committee. Write that out. So essentially, the three members to the board, because it cannot be more than three members in the ex official chair. Jude still stands as chair unless there's objection. Sherman and Hoskins. So I will take a vote on the amendment to insert the names. All in favor of the modified resolution?
I have a question, which is hearing Board Member Hoskins' comments and hearing Board Member Torchino's follow-up on Board Member Hoskins' comments. I'd just like to confirm that Board Member Torchino, who is new to the board and new to this space, is comfortable sitting as the chair of this committee and has volunteered to serve as the chair of this committee.
Yes, and certainly Board Member Toshnot can, decline that position, that is his right, or he can accept it. Yes.
I can state simply just based on expertise, and I am in fact a new member of the board. I'm not certain that my appointment as chair is actually appropriate based on my expertise and based on the fact that I am a newly appointed member. So I have no problems in terms of serving on I have no issue with serving, but as it relates to the chair position, I don't think that I'm ready in terms of that capacity.
Okay, and I respect your position on that, but just having reviewed your background and having conversations with you, I do feel you have that position. Your background is solid and, it's no question, but I do respect your position and the position of Board Member Hoskins, and therefore will move to have Board Member Hoskins, if she accepts, to chair the rulemaking committee. And I know that time is a consideration for you, Board Member Hoskins, because you expressed that to me before.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for your honest stepping up in this important issue. I do accept sitting on this committee as chair and serving with my other two board members.
Okay, if there's no other questions. Are we clear on the resolution? Does anyone need it restated? Okay,
Just for clarity for the record, if you could restate it.
Now therefore be it resolved that the board will establish a rulemaking committee comprised of Board Chair Dwayne Sampson, Board Member Torshinaw, Board Member Sherman, and Board Member Hoskins to review the requirements of local law number 42 and draft amendments to the board's RMAS rules accordingly. And it is further resolved that Board Member Hoskins shall serve as chair of the board's rulemaking committee. And it is further and finally resolved that a copy of this resolution be posted conspicuously on the board website.
thank you. Will a board member move for a vote on the resolution?
Second.
The resolution has been moved and seconded. Does any member have edits or comments on the proposed resolution? All in favor of approving the resolution establishing a rulemaking committee? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, it is approved. Thank you, and I look forward to the next meeting, the first meeting of the rulemaking committee. And hopefully we can have it sometime this week or early next week, based on the serious nature of rulemaking for local law 42. At this time, just some general comments that I'll make. The Board of Correction is really at a point where, at a critical period, where our decisions and our recommendations to policy, to the department, are going to be very transformative for many years to come. I hope this body comes together more and more to understand that the work that we do is critical to those who live and work in our jails in New York City. Not for personal gain or for political gain, but I visit the jails quite regularly, and people working and living in the jails, they're having a difficult time. They're having a very difficult time, and we need to come together to make that better, not to really run some type of show. Let's get some real work done so that we can impact New York City jails. At this time, I'll change it over to our executive director.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a moment. Chai Tu. Brings a wealth of experience. HS, the Mayor's Office. Navina has been instrumental in health sector.
Excuse me, Jasmine, you're having a problem with your communication. Maybe use a different mic. I can hear you well, but
Thank you. Thank you. My next announcement is regarding Mr. Jamarly McFarland. He is our new Assistant Executive Director of Intergovernmental Affairs and Communications. He has over a decade of experience working in government, legal, and legislative policy, and most recently as a Senior Correctional Standards Review Specialist at BOC. Jamarly's experience working in local, state, and federal legislative offices has equipped him with the skills necessary to take on this challenging new role. And we're very glad to have Navina and Jamarly on board. I also wanted to take a moment to publicly acknowledge 3 longtime employees who were promoted to new positions at the end of last year. Ms. Katrina Blackman has been BOC's Assistant Executive Director of Monitoring since September 2023. In her new capacity, she is responsible for leading the monitoring unit's directors and staff to ensure the Board of Corrections minimum standards are met for people in custody. Safety, humane treatment, and respect for all are paramount goals for Katrina and her team. And Katrina has been with BOC for more than 10 years. She started as a CSRS 2 and was assigned to 8 jails and 3 borough courts. In 2022, Katrina was promoted to Director of Environmental Safety, where she was responsible for reporting on the environmental conditions of people detained in jails across Rikers Island. Katrina and her team look forward to working with agencies and individuals focused on bringing dignity to Rikers Island staff and the incarcerated population. Also, Mr. Joshua Akwaye, BOC's Director of Appeals, has a wealth of leadership experience. Joshua has spent the length of his 12-year career in nonprofit and local organizations, demonstrating care and compassion by leading initiatives and programs that promote a better environment for underserved communities. Josh has been at BOC for the past 6 years, and we are lucky to have him and his leadership skills. Finally, Ms. Melissa Cintron Hernandez, our General Counsel, started at BOC over 2 years ago as the Deputy General Counsel. Melissa formally took over the management of the legal unit in September, demonstrating exceptional leadership and poise. She manages relationships with all stakeholders, supervises the Special Investigations, Violence Prevention, and Intergovernmental Affairs teams, all while serving as the agency's Record Management Officer, Records Access Officer, and Chief Contracting Officer. Melissa is a tremendous asset to BOC and its mission. She maintains ethics and integrity in all organizational endeavors and holds herself and BOC staff to the highest of ethical conduct. We're happy to have such wonderful leaders on our team, and I just wanted to acknowledge them. So I'll move on to our updates on deaths since our last meeting. We share our deepest condolences with the family of retired Deputy Warden Vincent Thomas Frank Coppola, who passed since our February meeting. Regarding the census, as of March 10th, 2024, there were approximately 6,301 individuals in department custody. Over the past year, there's been an approximate 5.65% increase of total people in custody. And regarding the census for EMTC specifically, there's been a 23.81% increase in the population at that facility from January 1st, 2024 to March 10th, 2024. Broken down by facility, as of March 10th, 2024, in Bellevue, 48, Elmhurst, 7, EMTC, 1,399, and GRVC 956, NIC 279, OBCC 1,478, RESH 160, RMSC 362, RNDC 937, and West Facility 675. And just to follow up on some items that were discussed at the February meeting, in lieu of the ad hoc committee that was proposed at the last meeting, the board will explore opportunities on the staff level for collaborative reporting on the impacts of violence on both staff and people in custody, and we will be including feedback from all stakeholders. And regarding the PIC comment line, board members and members of the public expressed concern about the lack of anonymity, and we definitely took that to heart. So the board's comment line is undergoing modifications as we work to ensure that the testimony from people in custody remain anonymous. Anonymous recordings from people in custody will resume at the board's May meeting. And that concludes the BOC staff updates.
Thank you, Jasmine, for those wonderful updates and some great news as well. Right now, we will go into the board's executive director and general counsel will now provide a presentation on the findings and recommendations in the board's 2/21/24 assessment of the use of chemical agents in New York City jails. So Jasmine and Melissa, please.
Okay, we have some PowerPoint slides that are going to come up as we speak, and it's going to be both Melissa and I just giving an overview of the report that was published. On February 21st, 2024, board staff issued a public report titled An Assessment of the Use of Chemical Agents in NYC Jails. The report presents the findings of a systemic assessment of the department's use of chemical agents, namely the use of the chemical oleoresin capsaicin, which I'll refer to by its commonly used acronym OC. The report additionally offers 14 recommendations related to its findings, which if taken up by the department, we believe will make the jail safer. First, I'd like to highlight what this report makes clear from the outset. The sanctioned use of OC can be an effective means for disrupting violent behavior in the jails. This report does not question the indispensability of OC as a resource for uniformed DOC staff. In a situation where a fight or assault is occurring between people in custody and direct verbal orders by staff go unheeded, the deployment of OC might be the best option available to an officer to disrupt the violence and mitigate the risk of further physical harm. However, as demonstrated in this report, a significant number of OC deployments each month happen under circumstances during which interpersonal violence is not occurring. That is, they occur when people in custody are passively resisting direct orders from staff or arguing with staff. These types of incidents are a central focus of this report, and they represent one of the best opportunities for the department to improve its use of force practices and reduce the total number of uses of force occurring in the jails each month. Next slide. Board staff developed a comprehensive methodology to conduct this assessment, which is available to review in full in the report. But in short, BOC staff reviewed and analyzed all relevant available DOC policy and data related to the use of chemical agents. BOC staff also reviewed all reports submitted to the court by the Nunez Independent Monitor. Additionally, BOC staff identified 50 incidents of chemical agent deployment in October 2023 for analysis. BOC staff selected reported incidents of chemical agent use during which the person in custody was described as not being engaged in interpersonal violence at the time chemical agents were deployed. It's worth noting here that these 50 incidents do not represent all such incidents that occurred in the month, but rather the first 50 identified by BOC staff. Once the 50 incidents were identified, staff reviewed the available departmental records relating to these incidents, including stationary video, body-worn camera video, handheld video, use of force reports, use of force witness reports, statements from persons in custody, injury reports, and the incident reviews conducted by facility leadership and the department's investigation division. And for context, the anticipated effects of exposure to OC include, quote, swelling of the mucous membranes, immediate involuntary closing of the eyes, uncontrollable coughing, gagging, gasping for breath, and the sensation of intense burning of the skin and mucous membranes inside the nose and the mouth, end quote. Next slide. Because the majority of the 50 incidents board staff reviewed for this report involved people in custody being sprayed with OC for arguing with uniformed staff or passively resisting direct orders, it is imperative that the framing of this discussion highlights the department's anticipated use of force protocols, which are visualized in the flowchart on this slide, and also can be found in the department's use of force directive 5006 RD. These are the steps uniformed staff are required to follow when they encounter a situation in which it is apparent that staff members, will likely need to use force to address the situation, and there is time to prepare a plan of action prior to using force. As the report notes, these protocols are robust and call for support for correction officers, accountability for uniformed supervisors, problem solving, transparency, and mental health interventions for people in custody. A central finding of our chemical agent assessment is that these protocols are routinely not adhered to by DOC uniformed staff, and that following use of force incidents, staff are not making required determinations in writing of whether the force they used was or was not anticipated. There is also a foundational problem with the way the department tracks anticipated uses of force on a systemic level via its incident reporting system, which leads to a significant underreporting of anticipated force incidents. And I'll turn it to Melissa now, BOC's General Counsel, who will discuss some of the key findings from the report.
Thank you. The first category of findings relate to the increasing use of chemical agents during use of force situations. In the past 5 years, the rate of chemical agent incidents per 1,000 people in custody has increased significantly. While 2023 saw an encouraging downward trend from 2022, the average monthly rate of chemical agent use in 2023 was still 107.5% higher in 2023 than it was in 2018. In total, there were 3,603 uses of force involving OC in calendar year 2023. This is an average of 300 such incidents a month. Next slide, please. Slide 5. Along with the significant increase in the use of OC in the jails over the past 5 years, another important trend has emerged. Since 2018, the likelihood has increased that when force is used by DOC, it will include the use of chemical agents. In 2023, 53.3% of all use of force incidents included the use of OC, compared to 41% in 2018 and 36.3% in 2019. Next slide, please. The next category of findings relates to policy violations and other practice concerns identified by BOC staff during its review of 50 incidences from October 2023. BOC staff uncovered patterns demonstrating a number of policy violations related to the use of chemical agents. First, in none of the 50 incidences did the department determine that force used was anticipated, despite clear evidence that such a determination was merited in many of the incidents. In approximately a third of the cases, people in custody were sprayed with OC from less than 3 feet, an unsafe practice which is prohibited by policy. DOC staff also observed that in nearly half the cases captured on body-worn camera, DOC staff were not heard issuing required verbal warnings about the potential deployment of chemical agents. In 5 cases, DOC uniform staff was observed deploying MK9, a powerful form of OC designed for crowd control, on a solitary individual offering passive resistance in violation of policy. Additionally, in 8 cases, DOC staff sprayed a person in custody who was engaged in self-harm with a ligature around their neck, despite existing policy that requires uniformed staff to immediately remove or cut the ligature when encountering an individual with a ligature around their neck that's attached to another object. Finally, in none of the 50 cases did BOC staff observe an attempted or actual mental health intervention prior to the deployment of chemical agents, as required by the anticipated force protocols, even during cases where people in custody were heard requesting access to mental health staff as the cause for their resistance to staff orders. Nearly half of the 50 cases reviewed by BOC staff involved people in custody with a history of being placed in specialized mental health units. Next slide, please. Specific to challenges in investigating use of force incidents involving chemical agents, BOC found that in more than half of the incidents it's reviewed, false statements were made by staff in their use of force reports. Most often, the false statement was that a person in custody was advancing on staff at the moment that chemical agent was deployed, when video demonstrated otherwise. BOC staff also observed inconsistent use of body-worn cameras, with less than half the incidents reviewed captured on body-worn video. For each of the 50 incidents, people in custody reportedly refused to provide verbal or written statements about the incident to DOC facility staff. And in only 20% of the incidents did the department's investigation division determine it was necessary to interview the person in custody who was sprayed with chemical agents as part of its investigation into the use of force incident. Next slide, please. Thank you. In order to assess compliance with mandatory chemical agent training and recertification, BOC visited each jail on Rikers Island, finding that on one day, each of the jails had distributed chemical agent handheld units to uniformed staff who had not received their annual recertification training. Only one of the 7 jails was able to produce a list of staff who were qualified to use chemical agents. Such lists are required to be maintained in the control of each jail and updated regularly. Finally, departmental data shared with the board demonstrated that in 2023, only approximately 5% of uniformed leadership completed the required annual chemical agent for supervisors course. Next slide, please. The final category of key findings represents safety concerns. In none of the cases reviewed by the board did DOC staff appear to check with medical staff or review available records for medical contraindications to OC prior to deployment, as is required when the use of force is anticipated. It's important to note here that CHS has reported that approximately 30% of the people in custody experience chronic pulmonary conditions, such as asthma or COPD, which should prohibit their direct exposure to chemical agents. In at least one case described in Incident 6 in the case description section of the report, BOC staff observed DOC staff spraying a person in custody who was holding an albuterol inhaler in his hand during an anticipated force situation. And finally, the OC products purchased and used by the department have 3 levels of intensity. The department, however, only authorizes its uniformed staff to carry the highest intensity products, level 3 products. This practice results in the deployment of the strongest chemicals in environments such as infirmaries and mental health units that house vulnerable populations. Moreover, DOC officers who experience chronic pulmonary disease are only authorized to carry level 3 products, despite the potential risks of indirect exposure. Jasmine will now discuss the report's recommendations. Thank you.
You can turn to the next slide. So regarding training, The department should closely examine its current chemical agent training program and recertification process with a view to strengthening the program to prioritize the department's anticipated use of force protocols and other safety issues identified in this report. Annual chemical agent refresher training should include a video review of incidents that demonstrate prohibited practices. Regarding monitoring, the department should implement several monitoring initiatives related to its chemical agent practices, including identifying incomplete or misleading use of force reports, ensuring that officers with expired OC training certifications are not issued OC handheld units, assessing the availability and response times of captains to calls for assistance by correction officers, reviewing functional deficiencies of the current body-worn camera system, and reviewing the current processes for collecting statements from people in custody following use of force incidents. And regarding policy, the department and CHS, where applicable, should revise and improve current policies and practices related to the following concerns identified in this report: anticipated use of force tracking and reporting, authorization for the use of MK9, expansion of the use of body-worn cameras to always-on full shift recording, attempting mental health interventions prior to chemical agent deployment when the anticipated use of force protocols have been exhausted, checking for medical OC contraindications in non-emergency situations prior to the deployment of chemical agents, and a review of lower strength handheld OC units. And we'd now like to, you could turn to the final slide. We'd now like to invite the department and CHS to respond to the report and describe any plans or ongoing efforts to address concerns that were raised.
And excuse me, also, at this time, after the department's response, any board members that have questions for Jasmine or Melissa regarding their presentation, please move forward. How you doing? If you can please state your name and position.
Good afternoon. My name is Kimberly Joyce. I am the Nunez manager with the Department of Correction, a position that I have held since June 2023. In short, I was chosen by the former commissioner to act as a conduit between the department and the Nunez monitor and monitoring team to ensure timely and accurate information is provided to them and that the transparent and collaborative relationship we've developed continues. First, I want to thank the board for this very thoughtfully written report. The department has reviewed the report and is already working in collaboration with our partners at Correctional Health Services, as well as the monitoring team, to address many of the board's recommendations. For example, the department is already promulgating an updated rapid review form on April 1st, 2024, which directly addresses the board's recommendation to adjust the form to require facility leadership make a determination if a use of force was anticipated. The department has initiated review of the current training and engaged the monitoring team on getting the training, including that for supervisors, revised and approved. Our acting Deputy Commissioner of Training, Jeremiah Johnson, is here and can answer any specific questions you may have. I should note for the record for the board and for those present, as you're likely aware, that any policy revisions in this space must be reviewed and approved by the Nunez monitor as required by the consent judgment and remedial orders. Finally, the department has conducted an audit of the current mountings and backings for the body-worn camera system, which will improve practices related to the body-worn camera backings to ensure that staff are able to utilize the body-worn cameras properly. I am happy to answer any questions that you may have. We also have security operations folks from the department present to answer if there are any more specific questions that I, as a non-operational person, cannot answer.
Well, thank you for that. And certainly I did receive communication from the commissioner yesterday that she had a funeral to attend and would not be able to be here. And I'm very pleased with the level of cooperation between the Nunez monitors and team and the department. Only good things can happen from that. So thank you
Exactly.
for your presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions from the board?
Are we going to also hear from CHS or should I,
We can hold questions until we hear from CHS. That's fine. So thank you. We'll have CHS come forward and
Thank you very much.
thank you. Your plan for addressing the concerns outlined in the board's February 21, 24 report on the use of chemical agents in the city jails.
Sure. So
Please state your name.
Deepan Subedi, Chief Medical Officer for Correctional Health Services. So we also appreciate the thorough report and have met with our colleagues in the department to discuss ways that we can, improve the responses and the use of OC spray. Specifically, I think clinically, what's clear is that there are several cases where there may have been acute medical or mental health concern. And so I think there's a lot of room for officer education around this issue. And so we've discussed, including CHS and future trainings on identifying acute mental health or medical issues prior to an anticipated use of force. I think secondly, also the recommendation was to utilize the serious medical condition list. And so I believe that DOC is looking into how to operationalize use of that list when, prior to delivering OC spray. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. And board, the questions would be for BOC staff, DOC, Nunez, or CHS. Are there any questions? Ms. Sherman.
I'd first like to thank Jasmine, Melissa, Bart, and the rest of the BOC staff who I know worked extremely hard on this report and I think have brought forward information that that speaks to the spirit that the chair spoke of up at the top of the meeting of us all working together on critical issues affecting people who live and work in the jails. And thank you both for your thoughtful responses to the report, and I look forward to hearing more. I also did want to note that this report could not have happened without access to video surveillance and the board's ability to review video surveillance of all types was critical in pulling this information together and writing the report. And it is a very powerful report. I wanted to hear a little bit more, both from the Department of Correction and from CHS, about mental health interventions, because I found that to be an area highlighted by the report that was of particular concern. And it is good to hear that you've already spoken about it and about strengthening training and hopefully strengthening your collaboration on ensuring that those mental health interventions occur before use of force involving chemical agents. So I'd like to hear you speak a little bit more in detail about training and supervision of department staff, and also currently or plans for CHS moving forward, how many facility staff are trained and available around the clock to conduct mental health interventions in the jails in anticipated use of force situations.
Sure. I'll start very briefly and then I'll turn it over to CHS. I absolutely acknowledge your statements and it is critical. I think some of the components that have already been discussed, that we educate our staff about proper mental health conditions and interventions. So it's education, it's training, and as I alluded to, we're already looking at revising our policies, procedures, and training so we can tighten what is and is not an anticipated use of force, and when not, we should contact mental health. So I will turn it over to CHS.
Sure. Hi, thank you. So, I think when reviewing the cases, uh, in some ways, you know, there was a clinical signal even before anticipated use of force was considered. So, and we do have referral processes already in place. The department refers about 600 individuals per month to CHS for mental health issues. And so rarely think it's an opportunity to identify a clinical situation rather than, shifting what's thought of as a security incident into a clinical situation. So I think really the key is, like I said earlier, identifying and training on, someone who may be having acute delirium, maybe confused, obviously suicidal, and at that moment, referring and making sure that individual sees CHS right away. So in terms of, the training we have with DOC on that, first of all, we're involved in the cadet training for the new classes coming in. There's CIT training and refresher training that we're involved in. And so I think this just seems like another area for us to focus on is, around anticipated use of force and incorporating that same training on referrals and identifying mental health and medical risks.
Vice Chair Hoskins.
Thank you. And I'll just concur with everything Board Member Sherman has stated to the staff about the report, the appreciation of talk. But I also think a lot of times we miss the pink elephant in the room, right? So we know leadership can make decisions, change policies, say training. But I'm wondering if we had line staff in that meeting to agree, because my experience, leadership and administration can set policy and set rules, but if it's not accepted in the culture of those who work in the facilities, it doesn't happen. And I guess my biggest concern is especially when I'm reading the comments that were reviewed from the access to the surveillance from the individual being sprayed. I want to speak to my psychiatrist, leave me alone. I want to speak to your captain, and all of these orders are ongoing. So I'm wondering, take me to the hospital, why you won't take me in or call it in. Again, we can put good intentions, and I guess that's always the missing link when we have these reports while it's DLC as a whole, Department of Corrections, we know it's operationally siloed, right? So I guess my question is, in the decision to actually move towards the recommendation, are we inclusive of line staff to build consensus on the culture and the behavior changing in the facility?
Thank you for that question. I'll start, and I will acknowledge that if we do not have buy-in, nothing can get done. That is so very important that our men and women on the front lines buy into what is happening. I will say that given the nature of the recommendations and given the nature of Nunez and what is required to be run by the monitoring team and approved, it's not always feasible to have line staff in those initial conversations. But I do know that this commissioner is committed to caring for not just the persons in our custody, but to the men and women that have to come to Rikers Island and do the job every day. And she is committed to ensuring that the people that this impacts have a voice. So while they may not have been yet involved in the conversation, I have no doubt that Commissioner McGinley-Liddy will involve the necessary people in those conversations so that we can have buy-in. Because like you said, if we do not have buy-in, nothing can change.
I appreciate that.
Dr. Cohen.
I'm going to echo, but I think it's worth echoing. I think this is an excellent report, and it represents the kind of work the board can and should do. I also want to echo Board Member Sherman's comment about the unavailability, the impossibility of doing this report if the department, if we did not sue the department to get all visual aids back. And I would hope that Commissioner McGinley-Liddy, you will not try to follow in your predecessor's approach to limiting access to Genentech. Um, There are two points that I would like to make about that for the department. One is that we found that only 20% of individuals involved in these uh, episodes were interviewed by your investigative staff, and that seemed low to the people who wrote the report, and I agree. Is that something that you can do better on? And I'll just ask the other question so you could. We also were concerned with the availability of supervising staff, and particularly captains, and wondered uh, if that's a communication issue, or is that also could be a communication issue as well, but is it also represent the fact that there are not enough captains to do the job?
Thank you, Dr. Cohen, for your questions. I'll take the captain question first. I'm pleased to announce that the department has received from the monitoring team approval of the captain's curriculum training. So we now thankfully can put in new classes of captains to promote. So I believe the plan is to, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but to have 2 classes of 25 officers each be promoted to captain beginning in March 18th of 2024. So we are adding to the supervisory captains ranks, and then later on in the year, we will also be doing, hopefully, an ADW promotion class as well. So we are actively working at increasing the supervisory staff partly to address this issue.
Thank you.
And Dr. Cohen, I believe, and just to clarify, was your first question about investigations into these incidents? Yes, so we did do an analysis of the 10 incidents that were identified specifically in the report, and half of those had affirmative discipline given, meaning that there was misconduct noted for those incidents and discipline in some form or fashion was doled out. The other half of the incidents were identified as there was a form of misconduct noted, but there was not discipline associated with those incidents. So that, yes, I'm
I
sorry.
was not asking maybe what people settle.
One second, please. 1 second.
I appreciate that answer. My question was more specifically related to interviews with people in custody who were involved in the incident, and that was where we only found 20%.
Understood, Dr. Cohen. I will have to get back to you if that's all right with a response to that question. I don't have the appropriate people in the room today.
Thank you very much for your response.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Reynolds.
I'd like to make note that
Is your mic on, Mr. Reynolds? I just want to make sure. Thank
that
you.
we have, and we need to congratulate, we have a new first deputy commissioner in the Department of Correction, and she's present with us. So I think that we're throwing all the questions to the 2 presenters, which were excellent. But I think that we should welcome and congratulate the new first deputy commissioner.
Please, First Deputy Commissioner, you've been highlighted. If you have any comments, please.
I really was saving my comments for the programming. No, it is an honor to be here, and thank you to the public, significantly to the boldest staff members, the men and women, uniform and non-uniform members who serve our department. I will not speak or say words from Commissioner McGinley-Leedy. I will just reaffirm our commitment in working with the members of the Board of Correction. And I'm a little shy. I'd rather sit back and wait until you ask me questions on programming. Thank you.
You can stay right there because
All
I think
right.
we're segueing right into that unless there are other questions on chemical agents from board members. So now we'll go into presentation on planned program initiatives for people in custody. First Deputy
Sure.
Commissioner
Thank
Torres.
you. I know that the request from the Board of Correction was for our department to give you a presentation, but it would have been disrespectful of the Division of Programs and Community Partnerships members who just in a couple of weeks actually prepared some financial statements for OMB. And I think we're still working some of the specifics, but let me just share with you what it is that we were able to achieve through that division. Last year, some of us appeared in front of the Board of Correction and the public to basically say to you what our response would be to the elimination of $17.1 million that actually impacted many of our partners who were contracted to provide services. We shared with you a PowerPoint presentation. We also shared with you the steps that we had taken on how to move from contracted providers to insourcing. Insourcing being defined at that moment as services that would now be done by DOC staff members within the Division of Programs. Very specific staff members at the division. Associate correctional counselors, levels 1 and 2, and program counselors, not to exclude any of the social workers or the intervention specialists. We were very happy and thrilled that by July 1st, we had a complete internal plan of action on how these counselors would actually be responsible for the facilitation of groups in very specific areas. By the time we actually transitioned from contracted providers to our own DOC staff, our ratio of staff was just identical, meaning in terms of facilitators and those counseling staff members. The reality is that even before those contracted providers' contracts were eliminated, the division was already embarking in doing an internal analysis based on feedback from staff, as well as feedback from those that received these services, meaning the persons in custody. And there were certain things that the members of the division were already framing. And so when the opportunity presented in February of this year, we immediately took on to writing what was needed to further expand programming within our confines. One of them happens to be transitional planning. Transitional planning has always targeted a very specific subset of our population, the sentence population. But the reality that we encounter is that 70% of the population that we serve are not going upstate, but rather returning to the community. And so we needed to have a stronger presence, and we needed to have more facilitators that would focus on transitional planning. From new admissions all the way to intake. And so what we have created is a mechanism that these transitional planners, 37 of them, will be dispersed to serve detained and sentenced populations, both at intake, new admissions, general population, and then a model that we just created in terms of program houses, which are now known as an achievers unit, where those individuals assigned to those housing areas are interested in just preparing for reintegration. We have successfully created one of them at OBCC. We created it in October 2023. And the goal of the Division of Programs is to have achievers models at all of the facilities. And so transitional planning and transitional planners would be a constant and a presence. The next one I would like to frame for you, but I'll be very careful, and I would like to highlight our partners at CHS. We're talking about programming. We're not talking about clinical interventions. We're not talking about treatment. That is something that is done by our partners at CHS. What we know is that internally we have identified gaps. And in doing substance misuse, we want to target very specific housing areas at our facilities, closing those gaps that we have identified. The next one I'm very excited about, and I'll tell you why I'm excited. When I first walked into OBCC in 1992, I walked in as a provider and as an educator. And I've always done my best to ensure that there is sufficient funding to target education. For the first time, after a number of years, we are able to conduct and afford supplemental educational programming. Let me pause for a minute. Our partners at the Department of Education, significantly East River Academy, they are on island and they afford educational services for a very specific population, 18 to 21-year-olds. Anything that the Department of Education may do, they do based on their own internal funding. So not every 22 and above is targeted for services. We've seen the void, and in proposing and submitting this financial statement, we are in a better position because for the first time in many years, this type of funding that is being granted to us under the current administration supersedes any funding that has been made available in the past. When I go into funding available in the past or granted to us in the past, I go back a few years only because I've been with the department a few years. So I'm in essence going back to the last RFP that had been awarded to a higher learning institution. I'm going back to an RFP that concluded in 2002, where the funding level was approximately $1.5 million. And it targeted, I see you nodding, Vice Chair Hoskins, and the targeted population was minute compared to what it is that we envision doing under this model. We're looking at affording general education. We're looking at affording English as a second language. Why are we targeting English as a second language? The reality is that if you talk to any of our counselors right now, there has been a recent increase for very specific reasons that we all know of those who are in need of English. So when I go and tour the jails, and I deeply tour the jails, because what I need to share with you is that under Commissioner McGinley-Leedy, she has asked all of the members assigned to her executive team to tour. And it's not just going in and out. It's heavy duty tour. It is meaningful tour. Anyone from a director's position and above must tour, must ensure that they tour the areas that have been assigned for that day, that they are engaged in conversations with those impacted the most, our staff members and the persons in custody, that we obtain feedback and that we discuss what our shortcomings may be or what the needs are. So when I go into the jails, I do have open dialogues with staff and the population, and we know there is a real need for English as a second language. There is also a need for post-secondary education. The department has been actively engaged in affording post-secondary education through different partners. I could list for you Manhattan College. I can highlight Columbia University. I can highlight John Jay College, St. John's University, and most recently LaGuardia Community College. Here is the challenge. The challenge is that where we assign it, oftentimes the population that is interested has to wait either an entire semester or an entire year for that cycle to return. And what we want to do is close that gap. Something else that we need to target is that in allowing or granting access rather to the 18 to 21s to go into the school floors that are served by East River Academy. There's still a need, and that is tutoring. And since we have very specific space constraints, although we've made great progress, and I can go into that, but I know you don't have much time, and you know I love to talk. So when it comes to tutoring, we really want to be able to be in a position that we do tutoring for the 18 to 21s as a way to support the educational progress. The other component that we are affording programming through these financial statements, and once again, I look at my partners or our partners at CHS, is trauma-informed. But it's trauma-informed programming. When it comes to clinical, when it comes to very specific programs and very specific treatments, we defer to our partners at CHS. What we envision with this programming is to target very specific populations that at times have not received the type of levels of programming that we would like. We're talking about our protective custody. We're talking about our civil. We're talking about our other restrictive or supported structure houses. We know that we want to turn around and enhance the programming services that are currently afforded. Not to mention what it is that we project for the future. And what I mean by that is we're in constant conversations with our monitoring team, meaning the federal monitoring team. We listen to the recommendations that they have for us as a department. And as such, there's certain program housing proposals that we're exploring that will go into effect this year and significantly in fiscal year 2025. We want to be in a position that we want to be able to support with this additional programming significantly when it comes to trauma-informed programming. Then I have one more.
No,
It's the shortest,
let me-
Dr. Cohen.
No, don't take your time because
All right.
this is critical information and we'll get to.
All right. So then the last one is the shortest, is the smallest of financial statements being awarded to us, is for transportation. We will not negate the fact that in the past, there have been community-based organizations that have indeed provided their own transportation. But I use the word own transportation because usually these providers will transport off island only those individuals that they had really connected with while providing services. What we want to do with this particular transportation, meaning a van, is to be able to afford transportation from discharge all the way to the community-based organizations, no matter who it was that they were contacted by while they were in our care, but that we will drive them to their selected community-based organization, as well as any other place, such as transitional housing. And with that, I've given you the layout on how it is that these $14 million will be invested and will be used significantly by the Division of Programs. One last thing. It's very important that I say two things. Number one, none of these monies are for the DOC to increase their staff. The Division of Programs continues to fill vacancies because the reality is that we do have long-term absences within that division. We also are proud to say that if we talk about professional development, we should not be selfish. As a division, the Division of Programs supports the professional growth of any members. And the reality is that we've lost some members who are still part of our department, but have moved to other positions. They're no longer assigned to counseling. We also have experienced a slow onboarding of any new hires. And so as we manage that, we fill the vacancies, we do the necessary positions, we do the necessary backfills, we complete all of the necessary documentation, but there is a waiting period or there is a long period of time by the time the process is completed. And then I don't have to tell you that our census continues to grow. I needed to establish that. And the last point that I will make is the $14 million are not to bring back the services that have now been absorbed by the DOC team members. Insourcing will remain, meaning group facilitation will remain and will continue to be done in fiscal year 2025 by the members of the Division of Programs Counseling Services Unit. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your
Sure.
presentation.
Sure.
And I apologize for the brief interruption of
No, no, no.
of your presentation.
No worries.
Um, Programming is very important to this board. And the chair of the programming committee, Board Member Pitts, takes her assignment very seriously. And I'm sure she's captured every word that you indicated. At this time, we have a meeting scheduled for this Friday of the programming committee. And I'm sure it's going to be a longer meeting than anticipated, just based on your presentation and your words. I don't know if you want to go into questions before we bring CHS on to talk about the presentation of plans for outposted therapeutic housing units.
I'd like to ask a question of the Deputy Commissioner, not related to.
Okay, go ahead, Dr. Cohen.
Thank you very much, Deputy Commissioner, and again, congratulations.
Thank you.
But we sat here a while ago and listened to you explain to us why cutting $17 million of programming support from outside agencies would have no effect. And the mayor's management report, which you're completely aware of, came out just recently and showed that you're 30%, delivering 30% less programs than you were before with those things. So I'm not going to characterize what it is that you're saying, but it doesn't ring true to me because what I don't understand is why the mayor cut $17 million, caused tremendous distress in all these agencies. All of a sudden, it's a lot of money for them. They can't just move people around.
Mm-hmm.
And then 6 months later, you return the $14 million to the same agencies. I'm glad that the mayor did it, but it's just a comment because you know what I said. You know what the mayor's management report says. I applaud all the things that you want to do, but that is what happened, despite your promise that it wouldn't. I have one specific question, really. What do you want to do in terms of substance use? It's my understanding, and CHS could help me with this, that the best approaches right now are medically assisted therapy. That means buprenorphine, methadone, and naltrexone. And it's not, and making availability of those drugs available to as many people as possible, as soon as possible, with naltrexone, however you want to do it, is the key. There have been programs that which exist still, which are I would say old-fashioned. They are abstinence-based therapy encouragement programs. And
Dr. Cohen.
yeah, so I just wondered what new programs you're going to have, because it's a critical issue, as you know.
We're not going to interfere with the level of care and treatment that is done by our partners at CHS. We are bringing in very key players in the shape or form of 24 substance abuse counselors, KSAC certified, social workers, and mental health counselors. CHS can provide you with very specific models and describe to you how they approach that. What we are doing is, number one, infusing very specific housing areas, 9 to 12 housing areas in each of our facilities, targeting the general population that at times are not in dire need of the type of services that CHS offers. We are increasing the frequency to be 5 days per week. We are doing daily and weekly services and access to that level of programming. We're having a higher level of support for those who are assigned in those housing areas. And we are going to create a system where we can refer and do placements into sober living housing units, which is a brand new model that we want to open up in fiscal year 2025.
Well, I don't see any other questions right now, so I'll just state that regarding the contracted services cuts of the 17 million, just on my tours, and I think that board members that toured with me, I'm pretty thorough and engaging in my tours. And how are you actually measuring and capturing what was lost in that $14 million of contracted services? Because I'm a social worker by training, I'm finding a hard time to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I speak to some of the staff, and I just observe it quietly, and I speak to the PICs. There's some good things going on, yes, but how do we get that level of programming back and exceeding that level of programming?
On our end, when it comes to insourcing, when we look at that 29% reduction in the PMMR, we know what has happened within the division of programs, and we are tackling that. We know very well that there are 17 vacancies, and those 17 vacancies need to be added, need to be filled in order for us to ensure that we have that continuum and that we're able to reassign our staff members. So we are actively looking into that. The other aspect that we've done is that effective this March, we brought in 3 additional providers for our advancement and enrichment subdivision in order to afford additional services. So we know what the report has demonstrated, but we're not just sitting back. We are being active and proactive to determine how best to continue that level of service.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ward.
Thank you and congratulations.
And to you as well.
Thank you. In my tour yesterday, I was fielded with a few questions surrounding GED programming. Can you share
Sure.
anything about that?
Can you tell me where you were, if I may?
Well, I toured several facilities.
We were at Rosie's in rest facilities and Pace as well.
When it comes to the GED, instruction or education on Rikers Island is mandated for the 18 to 21-year-olds. And as such, we work very closely with the Department of Education, East River Academy. We've created specific school sites in specific buildings, and I can give you the list, but I will not take much of your time. Any 18 to 21-year-old who requests educational services through Form 3503B must be granted access to the school site. For that reason, there are steady, trained, and assigned officers to each of the school sites to ensure that The call down list produced by the Department of Education and given to the department on a daily basis is actually used to bring in the 18 to 21-year-olds. That is the mandated service. DOE, East River Academy, at very specific sites, does target 22 and above. But there is a long list where we have 22 and above being served right now by the DOE is at Rose M. Singer, as well as the Robert N. Davron Center. Here is the beauty of it, that we know too well that 18 to 21-year-olds are requesting educational services significantly at RNDC. And so as a department, what we did was we had a setback with one of our areas last year. The area got flooded. And so through the efforts of our FMRD division, we were able to retrofit and to fix the second school site at RNDC, the annex. And early February, the DOE is now affording instruction at 2 sites, the main school floor at RNDC and the annex school floor. The DOE and the DOC have not stopped there. In fact, March 4th of this year, the DOE came forth to one request made by the DOC, and they are now affording what is known as per session, targeting additional 18 to 21-year-olds. And so when you take a look at budgets, I can speak for the budget assigned to the Division of Programs, and I'm presently in my new capacity learning the budgets for all of the divisions that I'll have the privilege to support. But there are constraints also on the DOE's budget. And in having this new programming component coming in, we'll be able to expand high school equivalency to all other jails. You're welcome.
Yeah, any other questions for the First Deputy Commissioner? Well, thank you, First Deputy Commissioner.
You're welcome.
If,
Thank you.
CHS could make their way to the podium. But I want to take a quick commercial break, if that is what it is. We had a group come into the auditorium a moment ago and just wanted to acknowledge that St. Anne's School, Brooklyn, New York, students are taking a seminar course, Crime and Punishment, and they're specifically here for the discussion on the most recent report about the use of chemical agents at Rikers. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being civic-minded. I know St. Anne's well. I have family members that are alum from there, and I have friends whose children is there now. It's perhaps one of the most finest institutions in the country, as I know it. Okay, so thank you for being here. Next commercial break is regarding the Rules Making Committee, and just to acknowledge that that committee is an ad hoc committee, as the vice chair has acknowledged to me, and that once that work is done from the committee, you know, it will be a resolution to disband the committee to move forward. Okay. So CHS, Doctor, sorry. Sorry for the commercial break.
Thankfully, I'm nimble. Yeah, I think there's a slide deck. The board had asked for an update on the outposted therapeutic housing unit. So I think while you're putting up the slide deck.
Yes, could you,
Sure.
did you state your name and?
Sure, sorry, Patsy Yang, Senior Vice President at Health and Hospitals for Correctional Health Services. And last Monday, we were delighted that the mayor directed Health and Hospitals proceed with the construction of the outposted units at Woodhull Hospital and North Central Bronx Hospital. And with the completion of those 2 additional sites, that should bring approximately 360 beds online outside of Rikers, outside of the jails. that I'm speaking out of memory right now without a slide deck, that will accommodate those of our patients who are currently in custody or will be in custody, who would benefit from being physically closer to the specialty services that are only available in a hospital. These are patients who are not sick enough to require inpatient hospitalization as hospital patients, but they do require regular access to services that are only available in the hospital. Gosh, I'm sort of running out of steam here. The idea here is to bridge that gap between what we can offer in the jails and in the hospitals. It is unique in that it's the same as the jail-based therapeutic housing areas in that we will be clinically cohorting patients based on what their medical needs are, as we currently do in some of the medical and mental health units on Rikers. It will also mimic those units in that the Department of Correction will continue to provide custody and security and operational support, and that Correctional Health Services will continue to be the primary healthcare provider, but literally in closer coordination with the hospital specialists. What is unique about these outposted units is that it will, these are units that house people who are in custody. The units will meet all the minimum standards and the regulations that apply to jails, but will not be inside a correctional facility. They will be in a hospital, but they will not be operating and staffed as inpatient hospitals. So it's a bit of a regulatory aardvark, I'm calling it, and it is unique, and we think that nobody else is doing this, and we're really excited that we got the approval to move forward. There is going to be a map somewhere, but hopefully everybody knows where the North Central Bronx is in the Bronx, in the North Bronx, and Woodhull Hospital in Brooklyn. The 363 beds is currently subject to final design. The first site, which is Bellevue Hospital, is currently under construction, and the anticipated completion of the construction is December of 2024, this year, if the state gives us approval to operate. Otherwise, we're estimating the outside would be spring of 2025. Bellevue will have 104 beds, will mostly accommodate people with medical needs. It is well underway. For the other two sites, with the mayor's approval, Woodhull Hospital is the next site that's under operation. The first phase was actually a prerequisite relocation of a lot of Woodhull Hospital's current patient care units. So there's a renovated pediatric unit, a renovated substance use unit, some administrative and on-call rooms that were made to clear out the 9th and 10th floors of Woodhull Hospital, which is where the outposted units will be. Phase 2, which is really stabilizing and fortifying the roof, because that will be the location of the outdoor recreation deck for our patients, is underway currently. And the preliminary design for the outposted units themselves at Woodhull is complete. So with the mayor's approval, what we are about to embark on beginning next week fairly intensively is with the Department of Correction and with City Hall and with the Office of Management and Budget, begin a very sort of aggressive approach to resume and pick back up on the design. And we are hoping that in order to meet the mayor's requested projected deadline for completing construction of all the units by summer of 2027, is that we complete design and get state approval of that design, of the design for those two sites, in time to issue bids for construction in late summer and early fall of 2025. And that will give us 2 years to get this done. And that's about it. That was off the top of my head, so if I forgot something, I'm happy to fill in the blanks.
Any questions?
Sorry, we had some nice visuals for you, but of what
Vice
Bellevue looks
President.
like, but we don't seem to have that.
No, thank you, Patsy, for that presentation and information around creating more space to address the needs of individuals in custody. I guess I'm trying to figure out, or just maybe I missed it, how are these additional bed space and all that play into the closure of Rikers with the barrel-based facility? Because I know did I mishear you when you said one of them's gonna be right outside Rikers or something?
All three sites, Bellevue Hospital,
Okay.
North Central Bronx, and Woodhull Hospital will all be within existing New York City Health and hospitals.
Okay.
Um,
So
the-
yeah, that was my question because it feels as if we've dedicated money to that, which we have to, which was part of the plan. But I'm just wondering, how does it play in partnership with that plan?
Yeah, the outpost units were really a concept that Correctional Health Services came up with independent of the borough-based jails. This is several years ago. And what we recognized was that the efficacy of the therapeutic units on island in terms of access, medication and treatment adherence, the more therapeutic milieu, the relationship with staff and patients was a really good model, but that there were still people who needed care that's only available and appropriately only available in a hospital. Things like chemotherapy, for example. It's not something that we would do in a jail. But yet that the trip literally from jail to a hospital for what could be a few hours or a few minutes of specialty or subspecialty care. An infusion can take half an hour or several hours, right? That patients were very often declining life-saving care because it's a long trip. It's a day long. Not only do you sacrifice all the things that you would be getting, law library, commissary, visitation, law library, commissary, visitation, and your own time, but in our examples, where you have patients, and I think any of us who have been sick or know people who have, if you're tired or you're feeling fatigued or weak and not up to it, that could be a pretty daunting trip. And conversely, if you're not symptomatic and you're feeling well enough, you might just think, well, I could probably forego that time. And what we wanted to do, at least with these units, by bringing people closer to the services that we think they clinically they need and hopefully they will accept, would at least remove that barrier of physical proximity. So it started out, there was a very long answer, sorry. It started out independently, but I think it has evolved into a more important thing, not only as the population's the pathology, the morbidity, the disease burden of our population has changed, but as we recognize what goes into patients' acceptance into care and engagement in care, as well as the population on the island.
Thank you for that. That was very helpful because I think a lot of times I've been fortunate to be on calls with you to understand what the needs are and where people refuse medical necessity. So I really appreciate that for the public.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm gonna, just one thing, we do have the slides after.
Great.
After.
At least the picture so you can see
So
what it
we can show
looks like.
them after Ms.
Great.
Sherman's
Thanks.
question.
Thank you, and congratulations
Yeah, we're really
on
excited. Thank you.
reaching this point. It has been a long effort, and this is a really important initiative. I guess I have a couple of questions, and maybe these are questions that you or folks from DOC can answer now. And if it's not possible to answer them now, I understand. And we can have conversations in future meetings. I am happy to hear you affirm that these units will adhere to the minimum standards. And I would like to hear in more detail how that planning is working now. At what stage are you in that planning process? And it is very important to the board to understand how the folks housed in these outposted units will be assured access to all minimum standards for the duration of their stays. I also did want to ask a little bit about, I think from your comments and from prior information, I understand this, but maybe not as well as I should. It sounds as though the units are envisioned as places where folks will be anticipated to stay for the duration of their treatment and not for a brief stabilization.
Correct. Correct. This is not acute hospitalization. This is long stay, chronic, or more like that. The work that has been done, certainly Bellevue was the first out the gate, is the first out the gate, and there has been some extensive discussions and work and redesign and design. This certainly meets the minimum, in some places I would say exceeds the minimum standards, and certainly the State Commission on Correction will need to approve, has approved everything at Bellevue and will be approving also. So it sort of meets that plus hospital minus. It's not quite acute level of care. We're not doing the invasive kind of stuff that you would do in a hospital. So it's both. And it's and there's aesthetic parts of it too that are and therapeutic. I don't know, Patrick, you wanted to say something.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Patrick Patton, Deputy Commissioner, Fleet Facilities and Construction. I had an interest in part of OTXU. I used to work with Patsy at Health and Hospitals, and this was one of my projects from the beginning. So from the original design all the way up to now delivering, but now I'll be on the DLC side, delivering the project through to the finish. And I just want to state by saying all the lessons that we have learned from Bellevue are being pushed forward with Woodhull and North Central Bronx. So we plan to have accelerated, and we're going to be partnering with CHS, and we have their back on almost everything with going through state approvals with SCLC and all the minimum standards. Everything that is designed at Bellevue will be implemented at the other two facilities as well. And we are ensuring that the minimal standards such as recreation, law library, barbershop, religious services, visits, and mail, all that is ensured to be the same as it is on Rikers Island, will be the same as it is in OTXU.
Thank you.
So I think the PowerPoint had some mocked up shots, and then there was like CBS News coverage or
Yeah, maybe
something.
we
So I
can.
don't know what you're going to do,
It
but
may
that's
prompt some additional questions, so if you can go through the slides for CHS.
PS2 exclusive. With the threat of a federal takeover of Rikers Island still hanging over his head, Mayor Adams unveils a number of new initiatives to provide greater care and enhance programming for inmates.
The mayor also releasing studies looking ahead to possible uses of Rikers after it shuts down. CBS 2 political reporter Marcia Kramer here now with the story you'll see only on 2. Marcia.
Well, Maurice and Christine, it's clear that Mayor Adams is in overdrive, working to change conditions at Rikers and avoid a federal takeover. One of his initiatives is building a special care center at area hospitals where inmates will live until they're well. I got to tour one being built at Bellevue Hospital.
to my knowledge, nobody's done this anywhere else.
Patsy Yang, the Senior Vice President for Correctional Health Services at NYC Health and Hospitals, was over the edge excited to show CBS 2 the new 104-bed inmate healthcare center being built at Bellevue. One of 3 the Adams administration is building so that inmates in need of care can stay in a hospital until they are well.
The arduous trip back and forth from Rikers to the hospital for what may be a few minutes of care is so daunting that if you're feeling sick and weak, that is just too much for you to ambulate and to undergo, and so you may decline a life-saving service.
The facility will have some dormitory-style facilities as well as private rooms, and there will also be a new outdoor recreation area. Can they walk around? Will there be gym?
Yeah, there'll be basketball court.
Basketball court? The Bellevue site will open this spring. 2 others at Woodhill Hospital in Brooklyn and North Central Bronx are scheduled to come online in 2027.
That wasn't, well, there's a mock-up, and I was corrected, it's a half a basketball court, it's not the full thing, so. But you get a sense of the light, it's acoustically and visually better, good.
You keep mentioning Central Hospital.
North Central Bronx.
Toby or scrap out?
It'll be 3 health and hospitals, and it's North Central Bronx in the Bronx, Woodhull Hospital in Brooklyn, and Bellevue Hospital in Manhattan. We did skip Queens at this point in time, but we believe that the 360 or so beds at the end of the day will be sufficient in number to accommodate those people based on projected population, who need that access to care in a hospital without being hospitalized. Oh,
Well-
maybe we could just flip to some of the pictures. Is that possible?
You want to go through some of the
Yeah,
slides? So if you
I
just
don't know who-
direct,
who's in-
to them, your slides.
So those are the locations of the three, in case, so it's in North Bronx, obviously Lower Manhattan, well, East Side, and Woodhull and Brooklyn. If you go to the next, it's their mock-up. So this is sort of what the renderings will look like at the end of the day. So you can take my face off and put the PowerPoint up.
Yeah, I apologize. We didn't have the slides.
That's
right
okay,
before you
but
presented.
so there's that station on the right is the clinical staff station. I think that's some of the housing areas will be open dorm space, and others will have individual rooms. And this is a sort of a rendering of what the open dorm areas would look like. And then I think if the next slide, that's sort of the recreation deck. You can actually see we have changed the exterior of Bellevue Hospital. On the FDR side, when you're coming off, you can actually peek a little bit of it. This extension, the exterior extension to a recreation deck outside has been constructed. Bellevue has been a fabulous partner. We have, Patrick, constructed this over the Bellevue Hospital Emergency Department without disrupting the hospital itself. And you'll see there on the lower left is an example of one of the finished, actually already finished, one of the individual rooms. You'll see that. So that's basically what it'll look like. There's day rooms, there's treatment rooms, group and individual counseling areas. Yeah. That's about it.
Well, thank you. I can say I visited Bellevue maybe 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. And I didn't visit the constructed areas, but I did visit the current facilities
Yeah.
for DOC. And I can say that, in speaking to PICs and staff, and just observing the level of care for those in most critical need was very,
Yeah.
very, very intense and caring. In speaking to staff yesterday at one of the units on Rikers, he made a statement regarding his discussion with a PIC that had a toothache or something like that. And instead of waiting, why don't you get it taken care of here while you in custody? So this way, when you leave, you don't have the burden of expense and trauma trying to get that care. Is there, and I know this is off topic, is there a transitional health services program for those who are transitioning out of custody?
Yes, very much so. So thank you, Chair. Just before I get off the topic of Bellevue, the people that you spoke with, probably the patients at Bellevue now, they're on the 19th floor in the Bellevue locked inpatient unit. That will remain unchanged. Elmhurst and Bellevue will continue to provide inpatient hospitalization care that's separate from these outposted units, which are basically ambulatory, except you're residing because of custody. Yeah, we Correctional Health Services, particularly since we came over to New York City Health and Hospitals, has really developed and enhanced its reentry and discharge planning and transition services. These are unlike what First Deputy Commissioner Torres described as what DOC does. Ours is really clinically focused, and from day one, getting people sort of making sure that they have Medicaid, the sort of the health insurance that removes the access question on release, connecting people to care and providers in the community, doing transition and making even appointments and referrals to community providers before people leave. I think you may have heard about our points of reentry and transition service practices. These are 2 outpatient ambulatory models that Correctional Health Services did with Health and Hospitals at Bellevue and Kings County, where our providers the same doctors and that saw you when you were inside rotate out and are at Bellevue and at Kings County, working alongside with those hospitals providers to ease, it's a familiar face. It's a greater temporal access. It doesn't, you can walk in, you don't have to have the appointment. It's actually a much more supportive transition into what many of us, even those of us who are well versed in what insurance and providers and networks and prior authorizations and appointments and registration and stuff can find daunting. So we do as warm a handover as we can.
Well, thank you for that clarification and note for the record. Any other questions from the board?
Sorry, again, DOC is very proud of this project and everything, so I just want to make that known, especially that part over the ED, because that was my pride and joy. Also, when this project is substantially complete with construction and is safe to do some more touring, we would like to invite the board of the BLC to do a tour of this actual facility, not just the 19th floor, but the second floor as well, with our partners at CHS as well. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Somebody just asked me a question, so I forgot to mention, these are units for people with medical, mental health, and/or substance use, many comorbid, but really just proximity to hospital available services. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. No other questions for CHS, DOC, or the BOC staff. We'll move to COBA, Corrections Officers Benevolent Association, for updates.
Good afternoon. I would like to address the chair, please, before my colleagues begin their testimony.
Yes, please state your name.
Yes, of course. My name is Keisha Williams, and I'm the second vice president of COBA. I'm here this morning to address what was said about me on Wednesday, February 28, 2024, from inmate advocate Victoria Phillips, who is present in this room today. I didn't get a chance to respond back to inmate advocate Victoria Phillips to her false accusations because you, Mr. Sampson, clearly stated on that day that COBA couldn't respond. I even spoke with you, Mr. Sampson, after the meeting and expressed how displeased I was with you and how you handled the situation that day. As the chair, chairing the Board of Corrections meetings, I feel you should not have allowed anyone to utilize their testimonial time for dishonesty. The BOC is not the platform for that. We are all here to try and be on one accord to address and try to fix issues. We all know that Victoria Phillips' accusations about me weren't correct, Mr. Sampson. You were there that day, along with the commissioner and DOC officials, and saw what took place, which was nothing like she stated. What inmate advocate Victoria Phillips said on that day, February 28th, 2024, was false. She had malicious intent on that day to defame my character, which is unacceptable to me. Again, I would like to say that I was very displeased by inmate advocate Victoria's behavior, and all of that was a lie. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Yes, well, thank you. And just note a clarification on my actions for, not entertaining your response at that time. It's just to try to maintain order so that we can proceed with the necessary business. So, but I do understand you were hurt by the comments, but for that moment, I didn't think it was necessary for a response.
Good afternoon, board. My name is Asaki Antoine.
the third vice president of the Correctional Officers Benevolent Association. I wanted to take a moment to check in with the board about some important matters that were discussed at our last meeting 2 weeks ago. First, the board forwarded a few special reports on the deaths of detainees, facility fires, and the use of chemical agents. I requested assaults on correctional officers, civilian staff, and nonviolent inmates be addressed in the same manner. Publish reports to identify issues and measures taken to improve the issues and accountability by the predators. In my testimony last month, I brought to your attention 4 specific unwarranted attacks on correctional officers. My question is, did any one of you on the board look into this matter? Was there an internal investigation launched? On our way down here today at this meeting, we were notified that another one of our female correctional officers was sexually assaulted. This brings the total to 61 since COBA has been tracking these sexual assault incidents. The detainee basically went to her desk, reached underneath the chair, and squeezed her buttocks twice. Yesterday, a male officer was punched in the face and was taken to the hospital where he received several stitches, 6, 4 to the upper lip and 2 on the inside. I went to the hospital and had to look at my member, look at the officer bleeding profusely from his lip. Now, the punch in the face was from a detainee, the unwarranted, unprovoked, right? But nonetheless, it was disturbing to report to the hospital and to see my member in distress. Without structure and accountability, chaos reigns. This is especially true in the case of detainees who have been granted a certain level of freedom within the facilities. In the absence of clear rules and consequences for their actions, these individuals may feel emboldened to act out or engage in disruptive behavior. The lack of accountability not only leads to chaos, violence within the facility, but it also sets a dangerous precedence for those who are responsible for the well-being and safety of the detainees. When detainees are able to get away with bad behavior without facing consequences, it sends a message that such actions are acceptable and may even be rewarded. This ultimately leads to a breakdown of order and discipline within the facility, making it difficult for officers to maintain control and ensure the safety of all individuals involved. Your recent rulemaking has further added to the chaos in the facilities. In closing, it was also mentioned by the board member, Ms. Sherman, today, that it's a good thing that you guys are reviewing the Gen-Tech and were able to identify certain deficiencies regarding chemical agent use by the officers. But I'm also sure that you watch the Gen-Tech and you see the inmates slashing and stabbing one another. I'm also sure that you see the inmates utilizing weapons to further employ violence. I also know that you all see them secreting and removing contraband weapons from their genitals or secreted areas. So I need to know, when are we going to publicly, or when are you all going to publicly address these issues or acknowledge? Let's have a public conversation. Let's really address the elephant in the room concerning that. It cannot be one-sided. You all see the violence in the facilities via Gen-Tech, right? But no one speaks about it in public. I may get a phone call, yes, I know, but these are the conversations that should be made in private. These are the conversations in real time if we want real solutions and if we want real accountability and real productive moving forward, really working together. These are the conversations that should be had. Thank you for your time. I'm going to now have Antoinette Anderson, my partner, provide her testimony. And we are also willing to answer any questions that you may have thereafter. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Antoinette Anderson, the Corresponding Secretary of the COBA. From our last meeting about, 2-3 weeks ago, we had an intake of certain incidents. We had 129 assaults on staff, 30 spittings, 96 splashings, 4 sexual assaults, 44 slashings, 27 stabbings, and 82 serious injuries to PICs. And your report troubled me. So these are some incidents where we are authorized to use chemical agents. As a last resort, where there are no practical alternatives available to prevent physical harm to staff, visitors, PICs, or any other person. To prevent or stop commission of crimes, including riots, assault, escape, or hostage situation. To prevent or stop the throwing or spitting of any liquid substance, including but not limited to saliva, blood, seminal fluids, urine, or feces. To prevent the destruction of property, which we have on a daily basis, including their tablets. To enforce departmental or facility rules. To prevent an inmate's PIC from inflicting self-harm. As a last resort, when an PIC in restraints is still dangerous to himself, herself, and others. With all the violence that has taken place on Rikers Island, I am baffled and appalled that BOC would recommend the use of chemical agents be banned. We are assaulted, we break up situations between PICs. Chemical agents at times is our only resort to control the situation. Once again, with the department being over 50% women, how do you physically feel that we can break up fights between men that are physically stronger than us at times? Chemical agents, in some instances, have saved our lives as well as other PICs. Would you rather correction officers use physical force for every situation? Chemical agents help us reduce the number of physical altercations that we are interacting in on a daily basis. When a PIC is getting jumped, do you think that I can physically remove 3 to 4 PICs from jumping them? With the use of OC, that task is instantly possible. In the event of a PIC wrapping an item around their neck, we have several things in place that we can do in an instant. Yes, the use of chemical agent is one of them. If a PIC is hanging, how can I remove the item if that PIC is fighting me when I'm trying to remove it? If I stand there and do nothing and wait for assistance, I am the blame. If the supervisor doesn't get there in time, I am the blame. If I go in the cell and proceed to cut the PIC down and he is faking, there's a possibility that I can be raped or seriously physically injured. Unfortunately, if that happens, then it's my fault once again. For many of us, we have to think about all of these things when we are trying to do our jobs as well as preserve lives. My argument is always going to be this. I am a correction officer. I am not an orderly. I am not a therapist. I am not a psychiatrist or a social worker. There are so many expectations placed on us, but where's our protection? Now, the BOC is here to protect everyone. But when we come here once again, the focus is the PRCs. On page 5 of your report, the expectation of requiring DOC staff to consult with or summons a mental health professional to the scene prior to the deployment of chemical agents when force is anticipated. Depending on the situation, this is not possible at all. Once again, if the situation occurred and a PSC suffered a serious injury because I waited on mental health staff to get there to tell me whether or not I should use OC, I am the blame. Except for maybe one person, nobody on this panel can tell me how they will react in any situation that correction officers are placed in every single day. Whether we are sick, whether we have sick loved ones at home, we still have to perform 16-hour days and perform our jobs to the best of our abilities. The government failed the mentally ill population. By 2015, all mental institutions were closed. There is currently 97 hospitals with psychiatric beds. Why are there so many PICs with mental illnesses on Rikers Island? The criminal justice system is not the proper place for them to be. But when all of the mental health institutions were shut down, the city had no plan in place. They began to commit crimes, which some of them may not have realized their actions. Many of them are not really aware of what they are doing. Nonetheless, correction officers are trained to work in a jail setting. The government needs to get them the care and services they need. There are more PIC on PIC fights occurring as we speak. Most of the PIC population is charged with a violent felony charge. What is the plan for local law 42? When there is a PIC slashing, what is the consequences for that action? Where is the justice for the victim that now has to walk around with this mark on their face for the rest of their life? What consequences do we have in place? A PSC cuts another PSC and now receives a 4-hour timeout and goes back to the same housing area, possibly to cut another PIC? What deterrent do we have in place to deal with this sort of PIC population? Are we limiting commissary? Will we fine for infractions that are imposed again? Did the BOC generate any reports on how to keep officers safe? We damned if we do, we damned if we don't. Please make it make sense. How can we effectively do our jobs if our hands are tied at every way we turn? What plan/report does the BOC have in place to help DOC with recruitment issues? Who is going to take this job when all that is shown everywhere is the issues that we face on a daily basis? Now, another agency that comes in, tours, and never works in the positions, has bright ideas for guidelines for us to follow. Is going to lead to another PIC dying, or this time a staff member. The National Guard was called in to assist the train system. The violent people that are committing crimes in the streets of New York, when they arrest, now correctional officers have to deal with that same population. What is in place to deal with that type of individual? This report of incidents that you have generated on page 5 stated in 45 of 50 incidents, Facility leadership determined that force used by staff was not avoidable. What does that mean to me? Someone that puts on a correctional officer uniform could not avoid that situation. Compared to someone that looks at a video and critiques situation that themselves were never involved in. Advocates, correction officers, BOC, other staff have the same goal, which is to keep everyone safe. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Yes, we'll take questions from the board. We'll start with Vice Chair Hoskins, then Board Member Sherman.
Thank you for your comments. A couple of things that I do want to respond to. The first is that second vice president, is that what it is, second vice president, stated that the podium should not be made for misinformation. And I want to clarify that our recommendations did not say banning OC. It never in the recommendations did it say banning of OC as a recommendation from this board. But you also said something else that I think I want to make clear before I state. According to New York City, a correctional officer's responsibility under the supervision is to maintain security within correctional facilities, is responsible for the custody, control, care, job training, work performance of detainees of detention sentenced to correctional facilities. So part of that role is some of that responsibility, but you said something important that I don't want to undermine, is that when mental health facilities across this country, specifically in New York, were closed, the jail became the mental health units in cities. When we talk about the incidents against staff and we talk about the population that is sitting there, it's not a justification, but there's an understanding. What I heard today, and I want to commend you for, is something I think we've all been waiting for, is how do we become allies instead of adversaries? Because the opportunities and the situation is the same. We need more mental health institutions because those are the individuals, detainees you're dealing with every day. That is what the city has failed in some kind of way, and I see us moving towards. So I want to commend you for identifying that. And for me, that was a moment of opportunity to become allies in how we approach this. But I also want to make clear that according to the charter of the BOC, we have 5 functions: to establish and ensure compliance with minimum standards for the care, custody, correction, treatment, supervision, and discipline of all persons held or confined under the jurisdiction of the Department of Corrections. 2, investigate any matter within the jurisdiction of the department. 3, review grievances from people in custody and staff. So what I'm going to ask, because I think I brought this up to Jasmine a couple of times. How do we move from report out of incidents to the actual official grievance that correctional staff has submitted to the HR department of the Department of Corrections, and the department has failed to respond appropriately? Those are the things we can write reports on according to the charter of New York City that established this board. So what I want, or I would like to see, is bring something we can officially respond to and not just the account of what happened yesterday. Because according to the charter, we cannot research, investigate, or actually push for anything from staff without an official grievance. It's in the charter. So when you ask for reports, we can't do anything officially without the official grievance. So we would need to see that staff incidents, and I'm sure they're happening, are reported to the HR department officially, and your HR department has not responded. And I say that because as staff, you have an HR department, you have a human relations, you have EEOC, you have civil rights. This board was created because people in custody didn't have any of that. They didn't have any of that. And I understand, but even in establishing this Board of Corrections, there is a process for the people who work there. We just have to be provided with that information to be able to respond properly. That's all I'm asking for.
Ms. Hoskins, thank you for that. But I have one statement to make regarding that. And I understand the grievance process, yes? But you all also have access to the CODs. You have access to the Gentech, and you guys see certain things in real time that needs to be addressed and that should be addressed. You shouldn't have to wait for myself, my partner, DOC, because you have access, 24/7 access to actually hold people accountable. So yes, there is a grievance process, but yes, you guys have to do your due diligence as well because you're looking at it in real time.
I appreciate that, but I want to follow up. And we ain't gonna go into no.
No,
tick
we're
and
not-
tack.
we're not-
No, because I think we need some clarity. Here's the thing. Just as if I could see it in real time, I can't respond without the proper processes I've been mandated to do. Right? Just as we're asking you, right? You're here talking about what we're asking for the correctional officers to do to follow a process. We have to follow that process. I can't ask for what I'm not willing to do. So let's talk offline, but there is, just because of the charter is why I'm asking to officially bring it to us. I asked the staff, when staff from DOC brings a complaint, official, we have a responsibility to push that investigation forward. But I can't push it without the official understanding and information that a grievance has been filed. So we can sit here and have this conversation all day.
I have
I
this. So
can't
tell
act.
me what. So explain to me what is the responsibility of the board when.
Let me respond.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, and if you want to, continue the conversation, you can feel free to. Since I became chair, I've always sought to find some sort of balance between our activity. Staffing, on the board's part is somewhat limited. And so taking into account over history, not over the last year or two, but over history, staff has addressed issues of the charter that focused on persons in custodies, as Assistant Chair has indicated. But we are taking ways now, and our new Director of Appeals will work with our Special Investigations team. And this is, immediate to reporting in this area under Charter 626, Section F. So that is something that will be proactive and responsive on behalf of the board. And I understand your concerns and your thoughts because, as you stated, 61 assaults and ongoing. We cannot ignore, the harm that is being done to staff by persons in custodies or others. So we will continue to try to be better in this area. We continue to try to adhere to the charter, but if you bring us those formal grievances, we can take a formal action and generate that investigation and report and make it public as well. And so that it's not just your tally of incidents, but a thorough investigation by the board as to the circumstances with recommendations to remedy those matters.
So my question is for the board, for each and every one of you, you too, Mr. Cohen. When you see these incidents, right, on Gentech, right, when you see acts of violence or inappropriate behavior, misbehavior, what do you do with that information? I need to know. What do you do outside of us bringing it to you guys? Because when you see something, you have to do something. Yes? So I need to know, what do you guys do when you see stabbings, when you see inmates taking out weapons, when you see misbehavior, inappropriate, regardless to what side, what do you do with that information?
So I will say, when I'm from staff, I'll let staff, we don't sit and watch the tapes 24 hours. We actually go to the tapes when incidents have been reported to us based on the charter from people, around people in custody.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
So we don't sit
Okay.
and watch it, and we only go to that. When we look at your reports, the time and the date, and we look for the video for that situation only. That's
Okay.
all. So that is our mandate. I
Okay.
don't know if there's something else, Jasmine.
I would add, when staff does bring something to our staff's attention when we're touring the jails, we do look into it. One example is the triple tour issue. We look deeply into that. I think our staff even spoke with you about that issue. Another one is a correction officer spoke about the condition of the male bathroom in EMTC, the male locker room.
Mhm.
That's something we looked into. When staff brings something to our staff's attention, we do take it seriously and we do look into it. And I will work with my team to do any reporting that we can in this area and ask for your assistance in the data that you're speaking of when you come to the meetings. Share that with us. And if staff is going to file a grievance or has a grievance that they want to share with us, another process is referring things to DOI and DOC's ID. So these aren't things that the board members take lightly. It's nothing that BOC staff takes lightly either.
Okay, I just wanted to make that a little clear because, there is violence in the jail, right? And we can't control that, right? We're trying to keep ourselves safe. We're trying to keep the detainees safe as well. So when these things are viewed, and it appears, and I have to say appear, right, that you guys are viewing it and you guys are not doing anything about it, but then you're um, um, when the detainees call in and they call in and say the officer did this or an officer did that or the supervisor did this, it's like an immediate abatement of the issue. And I know I say this month after month, right? I don't want it to continue, or I don't want it to appear that it's one-sided, because how I feel, how my partner feels, and I don't want to speak for DOC, but I have to speak for DOC. It appears at some times that it's one-sided, and although we pour our heart out here, we pour our heart with facts, not fiction, facts, it appears that it falls on deaf ears most times. Most times. I'm speaking to many of you except the new Mr. Jude, right? I speak to many of you on the phone, especially you, Mr. Cohen, too. And we have great conversations, right? Conversations is good. It's good to have. But conversations without actions goes back to just what? Basic conversation. And we're not here for that. We want to move forward. And
I
thank
think
you.
we've established, if we see the grievance submitted, that, the board will be directed to take, actions that may form into a hearing, a report, or an investigation of some sort. And so please, the formal processing is critical in this regard regarding our charter.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. We will now hear comments from the public. We'll wait 1 second until. Okay, we will now hear comments from the public. Jasmine?
Yes, our first speaker, I don't know if Ms. Cumberbatch from Kobo wanted to speak. He signed up. Oh, sorry, Mr. Cumberbatch.
Good afternoon. My name is Lionel Cumberbatch. I'm the financial secretary of the Correctional Officers Benevolent Association. I had something written, but I discarded it because, as Ms. Hoskins said, I think that we really turned the corner. Today is the anniversary of when the city shut down. And we were all at a loss, didn't know what to do, and the Department of Corrections was in a shambles. They may not admit it, but they were. We had no plan, the city had no plan, things got really bad. But here we are, 4 years later, actually talking about mental health, actually talking about how our concerns as a group, as a collective, and for the first time in these 4 years, the charter was read, and it gave clarity to all of us together moving to make jail a better place for everyone. That was amazing. Today, I'm here representing 5,629 correction officers who battled through these 4 years, pushed the rock uphill against all odds, 20 hours a day. The young lady on the end mentioned triple shifts for years. No one's taken a study yet on what outcome that will have on their health down the road. No study has been taken yet on how many correction officers it's going to take to run this department. So we still have a long ways to go. A long way to go as a collective in order to make this a better place. Hopefully, joining hands and understanding that none of this is going to be possible without proper staffing and proper security. They can get here and say, we're going to do this program, this is going to be great. Those mental health / hospital facilities that are going on, they look fantastic, but someone is going to have to man them. A New York City correction officer is going to have to man them with proper training and proper staffing. It may work, but we're not there yet. We're a long way off. As far as the OC, olorexin capsicum that we use, I can't see it being other than what it is. It's a deterrent in order to stop damage from being done to the persons in custody and all bodies involved. For that to even be entered into the fray is beyond the scope of thinking. An inmate, person in custody, recently got stabbed 131 times. I had to look at this tape 3 times because it was that graphic and it was that gruesome. Without olorexin capsicum, OC, the murderer who committed that crime while in custody to another person in custody would have been successful. Going back to what my partner said, if you're looking at the film, how could you see otherwise? How could you see otherwise than this OC actually saved someone's life? And that's our function here. The preservation of life while in custody. All deaths are tragic. All of them. So what are we really doing here? 43% of our population are women. Those are the working staff. 43%. Out of the 100%, 90% are people of color. They look just like me and you, who are in this job trying to live the American dream and not asking for any more than any other city agency has. All they're asking to do to go into work into a safe environment, like sanitation, like the police department, like MTA. No one's asking for any more. All these officers are doing are asking to matter. Sounds familiar? Just to matter. Last time we was here, what's disturbing to me, and it happens quite regularly in this room, is I hear, well, get another job. We're going to go back, Mr. Ramos, to 1969, going into 1972, where they had a job freeze. And in 1972, they allowed only correctional staff, people of color that look like me, to come on to city jobs. They didn't hire anywhere else. So now we're here.
Excuse me, I'm going to ask for you to conclusions. I gave you courtesy of another 2 minutes, perhaps.
Appreciate it. So I'll stop there and I'll start here with you, Mr. Sampson. I appreciate you trying to tie it all in. I know that you're working hard and you know, for lack of trying to expound on it, it's difficult. It's difficult to try and rope it all in. So going forward, I just want everybody to understand that jail has to be safe for everyone, for all parties involved. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Michael Klinger.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Klinger. I'm a jail services attorney with Brooklyn Defender Services. Thanks for the opportunity to provide some comments today. In its recent report on the department's use of chemical agents in city jails last October, the board corroborates what we so often hear from our clients about the department's dangerous reliance on those sprays, as well as its frequent disregard for its own policies, requiring immediate decontamination and prohibiting the use of chemical agents on people who are medically compromised. Last December, Brooklyn Defenders, along with other defender organizations, filed an amicus brief in the Nunez case, which highlighted, among other things, the department staff's use of chemical agents in circumstances where it's problematic, if not outright prohibited. For example, the brief reported on a situation in which a person being processed through intake was ordered to strip and squat for an extended period, and when he eventually stood, he was sprayed directly in the face and on his body with a chemical agent before being pushed to the ground, eventually cuffed, and then left for several hours in a shower cell before being brought to the clinic. It also reported a situation in which a man whose cell was being searched was cuffed and then, after being cuffed, sprayed with a chemical agent directly in his face. He was then tackled, knelt upon by one officer, and sprayed again directly in his eyes and nose by another. He was then brought to a decontamination room that had no running water, no soap, and no towels. While we acknowledge the department has seen a leadership change since the board's report and since the amicus filing, the department's overuse of chemical agents has not changed. In the past week, we learned about a person who had not received prescribed psychiatric medications for several consecutive days, a separate and equally shocking failure on the part of the department and CHS. This individual had an episode during which he repeatedly banged his head on the ground to the extent that he sustained a large gash on his head. And the response from a correction officer was to spray him with chemical agent. Our clients regularly report arbitrary and close-range spraying of individuals already in restraints, spraying of individuals with known medical conditions such as asthma, and spraying indiscriminately at groups of bystanders. And that's in addition to frequent failures by the department staff to provide decontamination and prompt medical attention. The status quo reliance on chemical agents is part of a failing strategy to achieve safety and security. First and foremost, safety and security will be achieved with a significant reduction in the number of people in city jails, particularly through alternatives to detention and incarceration. But they're also achievable by providing more and better programming, access to medical and mental health treatment, access to recreation, to visits, to tablets, phones, news and information, to law library, to commissary. Improvements in each of these areas will have meaningful benefits for everyone, including department staff. And finally, Last week's preliminary budget hearing shed additional light on the administration's plans to provide for a return of outside programming to the jails. The department indicated that the procurement process is expected to take 10 to 15 months. That's too long. This programming is critical to the well-being of everyone in the department's custody, and the providers are not merely well known to the administration. At least some of them are already being asked by the department to do their work for free in the jails. We urge the board to engage closely with the department to find a way to fast-track any procurement process and restore programming as soon as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tashoy Miller.
Hello, my name is Tashoy Miller, and I'm the Director of Operations at the Women's Community Justice Association. Our organization works with and on behalf of women and gender-expansive people impacted by mass incarceration. Therefore, I'll be speaking today on behalf of the Beyond Rosie's campaign. As you know, the Adams administration plans for the upcoming Queensboro jail to more than triple the agreed upon number of beds for women and gender expansive people, from 126 to 450. This is inhumane, it is indefensible, it is unnecessary, and it is unacceptable. In June 2022, the Path to Under 100 report released jointly by the Women's Community Justice Association, the Independent Commission, the Center for Court Innovation, and John Jay's Data Collaborative for Justice detailed a step-by-step process to reduce the population of the Rose M. Singer Center, then roughly 300 to under 100. The steps were simple, common sense driven, and backed by decades of data. That the city has leapt to increase jail capacity before attempting to implement any of the report's recommendations is baffling at best, unconscionable at worst. Furthermore, New York City has successfully reduced its jail population before. For nearly 3 decades, a decline in jail population was accompanied by increasing community safety. During the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, the jail population was reduced substantially and rapidly, with no significant attendant rise in crime or pretrial flight. During this period, the population at the Rose M. Singer Center, the facility on Rikers Island where the city currently incarcerates women and gender-expansive people, dropped below 150, close to the original number of beds planned for the women's facility in Kew Gardens. In light of this evidence, there is no reasonable justification, practical, fiscal, or humanitarian, for the city to more than triple its planned incarceration of women and gender-expansive people. We have the means to reduce our jail population, and to do so is a moral and practical imperative as we chart the course for the borough jails. The Adams administration has claimed that its expansion of mass incarceration is a matter of simple math, beyond its control. This claim, in the same breath, has a budget that includes $27 million in cuts to alternatives to incarceration in detention. I urge this board to prioritize decarceration and apply pressure where possible to both the Adams administration and docs to reduce the city's jail population, not to plan to increase it with the shift to the borough jails, and to preserve and promote alternatives to incarceration and detention. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Natalie Fiorenzo.
Good afternoon. My name is Natalie Fiorenzo. I'm a corrections specialist at New York County Defender Services. I work regularly with our incarcerated clients to advocate for their rights while they're detained in the custody of the department. I wanted to say thank you to the board for respecting the urgency and importance of creating a rulemaking committee for the implementation of 549 in the jails, and especially for pushing to make sure that committee is made up of knowledgeable members and leadership. I also wanted to say thank you for completing such a thorough report on the use and abuse of chemical agents in the jail and providing specific recommendations to the department. I'd like to touch on that report. I know that we're all here every single month for these meetings, and we're inundated with information every single day, and sometimes desensitized to the horrors of Rikers Island. But please don't forget that the report that you published is scathing. It is disgusting. I'm actually having a hard time even discussing it at the moment based on what I've heard today and what I've read. You have now proved that last year, only 5% of uniformed supervisors, this is the leadership tier of DOC, were trained in the deployment of OC. That's give or take 630 supervisors walking into their job every single day and being handed a weapon that they are untrained to use. This doesn't even include the fact that 6 of the 7 jails could not provide you with a list of trained COs at the facilities who can use OC. You have also now proved that when a person in custody is actively self-harming, they are sprayed with pepper spray. That is, I'll leave it at that. This is beyond unacceptable. I mean, in what other field would you learn about something like this and it would just continue on, business as usual? It is abundantly clear from your report and from the public statements that COBA has made at last meeting and this meeting that you cannot take DOC at their word. Improving this atrocity in the short term will require constant supervision, research, and reporting on the recommendations that you put out. Improving the situation in the long term will require a complete overhaul of the Department of Corrections. Please do your best to commit to both. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last in-person speaker is Chaplain Dr. Victoria A. Phillips.
Peace and blessings. I'm Dr. V. I don't want to waste too much time. So anyone who knows me know I'd never speak on the record and name a person or anything without receipts. And that's important for me to state today. So last meeting, I gave an example of how I advocate and assist on both sides of the conversation. As an Army brat, I know all about the chain of command and how to move in paramilitary organizations such as DOC. For over 20 years, I have carried myself with respect for all while seeking the very thing I have never seen, justice. I know my last testimony was shocking to some and liberating to others. Those who also have been threatened or intimidated thanked me. In this glorious Women History Month, I want to raise the name of all the mothers, daughters, sisters, and partners of those impacted and who work on the island. And I also want to raise my grandmother, Ellie, who worked on Shirley Chisholm's presidential campaign. Grandma, I bring my own seat to every room. And I want to raise Tamara Carter, the mother of Brandon Rodriguez, who died on Rikers. I want to raise the boldness of Councilmember Hanif following the barbaric treatment of herself and Tamara Carter and all others on the steps of City Hall, along with the sister of Elijah Muhammad, while officers spoke nasty things to us. I'm a woman first, and when I tried to point out one of those officers in this room, 2 female leaders in COBA targeted me. This board has directly witnessed how I am mistreated. I'm
going to call some order, please.
What?
No
Why are you
personal.
cutting me off?
You can continue in a second, but I asked that your.
My time is still deducting.
I will adjust your time, but I'm gonna ask that any of your statement do not go to personal attacks.
I'm not. I'm speaking truth on the record, and I'm allowed to do so. I'm allowed to do so. Please do not bring your bias to my testimony. I will pick up. This board has directly witnessed how I am mistreated, even taunted while testifying. It's illegal to intimidate or threaten a victim, informant, or witness that testifies. I was approached in a threatening manner by Second Vice President Keisha Williams. Y'all ignored it, although I am sure 2 board members witnessed this exact exchange after January's meeting in this exact room. February, a board member privately yet disrespectfully asked me, why don't I let this go? No, I will not overlook being threatened by a bully with a badge. Norman Seabrook Cobra era is over. So let me ask you, Chair, this board didn't hear my cries last spring when I begged you to listen to CHS to speak. This board adjourned that meeting, and that very night a man died on Rikers. Chair, I say this with all respect. Hear me now. If someone with my expertise in over 2 decades in prisons and jail settings isn't acknowledged or respected, how can anyone in New York City expect you to properly follow up with detainees who file grievances? Lastly, I'll say I'm tired of being traumatized and discarded while doing this often non-paid advocacy. Chair, you yourself last year had someone physically put their hands on me to try to remove me out this room. I still haven't gotten a public apology. And I'll just say this. You didn't care about my truth then. You obviously don't care about my truth now. But an officer the other day that I testified, February 28th, actually did care enough that they told someone to watch the video, and that person sent me a message, and we spoke. They cried. They agreed for me to tell their name on the record, but they were scared, so then they pulled it back. But they did say that I could inform this board that they were terrified of repercussions of speaking out, but gave me permission to not say their name, but the fact that they filed a police report against Second Vice President Keisha Williams, I believe February 15th, before we ever spoke, because of threats made to them by the same person. And I notified Benny, the COBA president. I've notified people on commissioner staff. And I say all this because I follow the chain of command. And I will finish by saying, the person who was scared to speak, I have information that I could show this board off record. They put a complaint in. It has been buried, not followed up on. And I'm putting that on the record that they're fearful for their job, they're fearful for their health, and that's why they actually made the police report. And you need to pay attention, because when officers go rogue, things like what happened July 2022 in the Bronx often reoccur. When officers who carry guns cannot control their anger and are allowed to just run amok and have no accountability, bad things occur. Do your job, Chair. Do your job.
Thank you. And no, my job, I'm going to note for the record, if that, I'm going to note for the record that if such inappropriate comments or outbursts continue, you will be banned. Anyone in this audience will be banned from Board of Correction meetings permanently. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to our online commenters. We have two. The first one is Lauren Stevens Davidowitz.
Thank you. I have 3 quick points. I'm a staff attorney at Legal Aid's Prisoners' Rights Project. First, there's been much said today about the importance of DOC's provision of programming. I want to address its failure to provide legally mandated and fundamentally critical programming. We are counsel in Hanbury, the class action requiring high school education for 18 to 21-year-olds at Rikers. Contrary to what First Deputy Commissioner Torres suggested today, people in this age group who are required to get education if they want it are not getting it. DOC does not provide the escorts necessary to get people to school. It locks students in on school days. It does not house young people in school dorms and does not transfer them to school dorms when they request to attend school. And it provides sporadic or absolutely no education to young people at RESH. The system simply is not working. It has not been working for years, and it has not been fixed by whatever changes the Deputy Commissioner mentioned. I'm sure everyone here, including our visitors from St. Anne's, understands the fundamental importance of a high school education. And the DOC and the DOE are violating their moral and legal obligation by not providing it to many of the young adults in DOC custody. I also wanted to thank the board for asking DOC to address at the last meeting complaints regarding lack of access to recreation. We're pleased that board members appear unanimously concerned about this issue. Unfortunately, we frequently hear complaints from people in custody that they are not receiving the mandated 5 days a week of recreation. Just yesterday, I met with 3 young men housed in 3 different housing areas at RNDC. Each said that they get recreation once, at most twice per week. For the record, each wanted to be enrolled in school, but had not been. We asked the board to continue to investigate the violation of its minimum standards regarding recreation and to hold the DOC accountable for violations. Finally, we appreciate the board asking DOC to respond at today's meeting to its excellent and chilling report about the use of OC spray. We request that the board likewise use an upcoming meeting to ask DOC to respond to its recent death reports, and specifically asked DOC to state the actions that it has taken in response to the board's recommendations in these reports. The board has repeated some of its recommendations in multiple reports, which shows that DOC is not learning from its mistakes and must be held accountable in a public forum. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker of the day is Eileen Mayer.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Eileen Marr. I'm a civil rights leader from Brooklyn, New York, a social worker of 20 plus years, and a survivor of the Ninth Circle of Hell with Rikers Island, where I spent over 420 days at Roses. I don't know where to begin, honestly. By law, Rikers Island must close no later than 2027. We all know this. Every month, myself and a significant amount of my fellow activists and abolitionists attend these hearings and the like. We outline all of the human and civil rights abuses and violations occurring within New York City DOC. The inexplicable murders of detainees, most recently Mr. Manuel Luna and Mr. Williams at the hands of DOC. The detainee murders that the public has been notified of, that is. Medical appointments, including finger sticks, insulin shots, sickle cell treatments, and many other medical and medication treatments are erratic at best. MAT, or medically assisted treatment for opiate dependency, aka methadone, is given, withheld, or delayed on the whims of sadomasochistic COs who laugh and exclaim to the detainees, "I don't give a if you get junkie dope sick and shit and puke all over yourself." Last week, the mayor lauded the return of programming on the island for detainees. However, even when programming has been quote unquote in full force at Rikers, attendance by detainees has always been sporadic at best. Not of their doing, but because COs frequently fail to announce and escort the detainees to them. This includes programs that are constitutionally mandated, including law library, recreation, and religious services. COs will shrug them off, laughing at detainees who inquire as to said program status and times, and usually lie, stating the service was never called or it was canceled. Shameful. And to add insult upon injury, the mayor's proposed budget cuts DOC programming across the board to the tune of tens of millions of actual dollars. It appears that DOC, COs, and even our mayor only wish to fund, sponsor, inflict, and co-sign illegal and torturous, violent, and/or corrupt acts on the detainees. This includes, but is not limited to, physical and sexual assault of said detainees, rape, the unprovoked and unnecessary use of pepper spray on detainees who are experiencing adverse mental health episodes and suicidal ideations rather than seek out the proper medical interventionists, and the continued and illegal use of solitary confinement, so much so that New York City passed additional legislation barring the use of solitary confinement within the confines of New York City. Sadly, additional laws New York City DOC will willfully and with malicious and sadistic intent violate. It has been intimated to me yet again by not only several current detainees and 3 current anonymous COs that most of the Bings, aka solitary, are near to and have been near to full capacity for years now. The state law banning solitary confinement was passed in 2021. It's 2024. Clearly, DOC is incapable of abiding by the law, but we knew that already, didn't we? The continuous flow of narcotics, contraband weapons, and 99% of the violence that occurs in facilities has all been choreographed and facilitated by DOC staff for their own benefits, mainly financial. Retraining does not work. It has never really worked. New York City DOC has quote unquote trained and or retrained not to rape, murder, traffic in narcotics, weapons, other contraband, and however these behaviors continue. I saw more cocaine being used in the bubble by the officers than I did in the bathrooms at the Limelight back in the day. None of this is not what will end mass incarceration and achieve the legally mandated goal or law of closing Rikers by 2027. Closing Rikers and ending mass incarceration can be achieved via alternatives to incarceration, ATIs, real reentry program, community services
you.
such as violence.
We need you to conclude.
I'm almost finished. I'm almost finished.
You need to conclude now.
Okay. Real reentry programming, real community services, and a total reevaluation of the current and past and future DOC staff, even if that means firing all of them. And lastly, I want to say I've worked with Dr. Phillips for many, many years now, and she is anything but a liar. So take that as you will. But I believe her, and I think everyone else should.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Okay, that concludes the public comments, but I'd like to recognize one gentleman in the room, an advocate, Mr. Jack Davis. Mr. Davis, if you can, one, I wanted to thank you publicly for providing a formerly incarcerated presentation to the most recent class of corrections officers. If you can come, just maybe give a few words, please. Wait a minute, you gotta talk in the mic, because
I was listening to you. I was listening to your process of programming CHS, what you call them, right? I always say one thing y'all forget: the formerly incarcerated that we have bachelors and masters. You said something about KSAC, right? But I know if you was to ask half of that staff, what is a mandamus report? They couldn't tell you, right? There's actually a strong need, right? And me and the guy from corrections was just talking outside. There's a strong need for y'all to implement formerly incarcerated men and women to enhance the men and women that stay on the streets. Now, one thing I do agree with you, the men and women that's incarcerated coming home is not getting what they're supposed to get from some programs. But a lot of programs they are.
Mr. Davis, now,
right?
I brought you up here to.
I have to, excuse me.
I know you did.
I have to see one thing I have to correct something that's wrong.
I gave you.
And being that you don't want to do it, sir, you have to let me do it.
I gave you that courtesy.
Because a lot of times we stand up here and we talk, but we don't talk about what's really going on. We talk about the things that's on the surface. We never talk about what's on the bottom. You see what I'm saying? And even those that's formerly incarcerated, that's up there, I feel a lot of times they not even addressing what's on the bottom. One of the young ladies said something in regards about what's going on. I was talking to the young man about it. And I said, you know something? If we're going to talk about the problems that's going on with the inmates, let's talk about the problem that's going on with the officers.
Mr. Davis, I wanted you to come up to talk about something very specific that was meaningful and made change in the department. And if we try to address many issues, but that's specifically something that was very achievable.
It was only achievable because a lot of people didn't want it to happen.
Well, that's what I want to talk about. And I wanted.
That's why it was only achievable. What I did, I went and spoke in front of the Correction Academy's team. And one of the things I had to tell a lot of the correctional officers that were just coming aboard and said, don't forget who these people is that you're watching over. These are the same people that come back to your projects, that a lot of people that work there forgot they come from the projects. These are the same people that come from your tenement building, that a lot of the correctional staff forgot that they came from there. And I also told them that don't change your attitude, because if you notice, most correctional staff changes their attitude after 5 years on the job, sometime after 2. Their attitude becomes real crunchy. And the fact that I'm a correction officer, but the reality of it, You're just a correction officer. When you go out that door, you're nobody. And that's the tragic thing about it. You're still a civilian when you get out that door. That's what a lot of people don't want to address. They don't want to address the fact that I'm a civilian when I leave here. So what I did, they invited me, Ms. Pitts invited me, which was one of the things I did not spoke to and even a lot of the staff that was there even agreed with me. Because fear is something a lot of people don't want to talk about in corrections. They don't. They'll stand up there and tell me and you is this, that, and the other. But fear is something that they don't never express or talk about. Because when I went to Rikers Island as a kid, I was scared to death. And I did 30 years. And I was scared to death. And a lot of the officers that was there couldn't help me. You want to know why they couldn't help me? Because a lot of them couldn't help themselves against their own co-workers.
So, Mr.
Yep.
Davis,
So
May I? May I?
thank you, Mr. Davis. I'm going to have Ms. Pitts who.
Okay, some of the things that Mr. Davis said, he said, I don't really, to the recruits, I don't quite recall. He said a lot of positive things to the recruits. He told them, remember who you are, do your job, okay? If you run into a friend that's incarcerated, remember you have a job to do. Don't bring contraband in. He said all these wonderful things. I'm at a loss here, what he said. And the recruits, there were 72 gave me evaluations that were positive. The only thing, Commissioner Johnson, I would love to speak to them now that they're finished with OJT. Are they finished yet? Okay, if we could work it out where I could speak to them at their various facilities to see if what they were given in that presentation, now that they've been on OJT, if they feel it was helpful to them. But we got some glowing response, and Mr. Davis did an excellent job. I don't know what was happening here.
We're going to
That's it.
say thank you. At this time, I want to thank everyone who attended and participated in today's meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled to take place on Tuesday, May 14th, 2024 at 1 p.m. Is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Without hearing any objection, the meeting is now adjourned.